Hearing voices. Hearing voices.
Hearing voices.
Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
This is Hearing Voices. Conversations with the voices that bring the excitement of college sports alive.
No headphone can capture the complex bourbon and butter flavor of my actual timber.
Now, here's your host, the voice of your Fighting Tigers, Chris Blair.
Welcome in, Tiger fans. We head into week number 2. Believe it or not, college football season up and running. LSU last week, tough one on the road. It was a beautiful venue, great crowd, really good atmosphere. But unfortunately, they fall to UCLA in the opener on the road in the first ever meeting with the Bruins, 38-27. This week, they'll return to Tiger Stadium. We're looking forward to a great atmosphere there. Again, as crowds return full capacity, as they will host McNeese State. Plenty of storylines in this game. We're going to talk about a few of those coming up in just a little bit. And you know, the name of the show is Hearing Voices, so we talk to the voices you hear, bringing you college sports on the air, through the streams, satellite, all the thousands of ways now that you can consume a game. Please welcome to our show, just in time for this week, the voice of the McNeese State Cowboys, Mr. Tom Hoefer. Tom, thanks for joining us this week. And I guess similar to what I was talking about, it was a tough opening weekend for the Cowboys as well. But, hey, another week, got to get out there and give it a shot. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me. Yeah, it was a tough week for the Cowboys. A loss to West Florida. West Florida proved to be a very, very good football team, but the Cowboys made enough mistakes to really feel like that they should have won the football game or could have won the football game. And so I think there's a lot of hard work and a lot of scheming and planning going in this week in preparation for the Fighting Tigers.
No doubt about it. I imagine there's a lot of teams across the country. LSU is no different, trying to get ready for, to bounce back, get that confidence back, and, get back to their winning ways. And I'm sure that's on the minds of Coach Wilson and the Cowboys as well. I wanted to give fans and those watching the program kind of a little bit of background here, because it's amazing to me, because you are covering the Cowboys, you call the games, yet we're just coming off this devastating storm, Hurricane Ida, where there are still people in southeast Louisiana, lots of people that are still struggling to get back on their feet, get their homes put back together, put their homes anywhere, for that matter, is also without power, without water. You're no stranger to that, because you work on the front line, so to speak, and the people that work on the front lines. And, of course, Lake Charles had more than their fair share of storms through last fall as well. Tell everybody what it is you do when you're not using the dulcet tones to call the action of the Cowboys.
I have a full-time job as the communications and media director for the Calcasieu Parish Police Jury, the governing body of Calcasieu Parish, and that includes the Office of Emergency Preparedness and Homeland Security. So, it's a busy time of year to try to be the voice of the Cowboys, as well as making sure that everybody gets the information they need about the hurricanes. We went through a lot last year about this time, and we sympathize, and our hearts go out to the people in southeastern Louisiana that are dealing with the same thing that we went through last year.
Obviously, when you have a major storm and you have devastation, and you guys really have to get on the ground and get to work and communicate with multiple agencies, it's, hurricane season a lot of times right there in the middle of football season. Take away those type of years where obviously, you have to get to work on helping the people of your parish. Just in general, on a weekly basis, I think it's amazing that you find time to do, research and prep, all the things that we all do to get ready for a game, when you're also got all of this going on, your main job. It's amazing. How do you pull it off?
Well, it's difficult. It's challenging. It's rewarding. Both of my jobs are really rewarding. Of course, like everybody else that does this football and sportscasting, we all wanted to do this when we were kids. So it's really rewarding for me to be able to do that. I have to have the cooperation and the willingness of both my regular employer here at the parish and McNeese to kind of work with me and allow me to be able to do that. One of the things that I'm fortunate that I don't have to do, I like to do it, but I can't always do that, is travel to the road games during basketball and baseball season. So we have someone else that is capable of doing that and does that. During football season, I do travel and enjoy it, quite a bit. But yeah, it's a load to handle. My wife, I gotta thank her for allowing me to do that as well. There's a lot of time away. So she's been wonderful for all these 22 years that I've been able to do this.
It's amazing. I know you were telling me earlier before we went on, 22 years calling the action for McNeese State, and I think you said 2 football games, all that you've missed?
Yeah. Yeah, both because of hurricanes. It was 2008, Hurricane Gustav. I missed a trip to North Carolina when the Cowboys played the Tar Heels due to that one. And then just a few years ago when Hurricane Harvey was hitting Houston, and we were actually accepting evacuees from over in East Texas who were in the floods. I was not able to go to a game against Nichols there. So that's what I've missed. And thankfully we have people, and McNeese is able to cooperate with me and indulge my real job and allow me to do that. So that's it, two games.
Wow, that's impressive. Tom Hoefer, the voice of the McNeese State Cowboys. Our guest this week on Hearing Voices, as he and the Cowboys will be coming over to Tiger Stadium coming up this weekend for the opening home game of 2021 for LSU. You mentioned that all of us who eventually found ourselves in this business of calling sports or sportscasting grew up wanting to do this. That certainly is true for me, and I think your theory, you're onto something. It may become a law soon, because most of the people I have talked to have said the very same thing. So give us your background. Where are you from? Where were you exposed to sportscasting? Who are your heroes? Why did you want to do this crazy job and run around the country calling 18 to 22-year-olds on the field?
I'll start with the last part. The reason I wanted to do this job is because very early in my life, I discovered I wasn't good enough to be the quarterback or the pitcher or the shortstop, playing the game. And so from a very young age, I grew up in Southern Illinois, across the river from St. Louis, and I was a Cardinals fan in baseball and football, and I was a big Blues hockey fan. And one of my sportscasting heroes as a very young child, 7, 8 years old, was Dan Kelly. He was the voice of the St. Louis Blues. I just thought he was fantastic, and I wanted to be him. I also was very fortunate to hear Bob Costas in his very, very young days working for KMOX in St. Louis, and he did ABA basketball in the mid-'70s for the team in St. Louis called the Spirits of St. Louis. So I was always enamored with Bob Costas and his sportscasting style. And of course, Jack Buck was the voice of the Cardinals, and he was fantastic. And so I grew up listening to those guys, and they were the ones that inspired me to do this.
So you hear, and that is that's a pretty good list. That's pretty good exposure to the broadcasting, sportscasting world when you have names like Jack Buck, obviously, Dan Kelly, and Bob Costas. But when did you say, okay, I think I'm going to try this thing? And then secondly, it's interesting because in today's age, Tom, with all the technology, it's kind of, I won't say easy, but the access is there to start your own podcast.
Yeah.
You can get on Twitch as the kids do and call Madden games. And so there's an opportunity to actually practice and get those reps that we talk about that just did not exist when you were coming up, when I were coming up. I mean, you had to have somebody have enough faith in you to say, okay, we're going to give you a microphone, we're going to give you some type of connection, and there's a game we need you to go talk about. So how did you break in there? Because that is not easy to do, and you got to be willing to do just about anything.
So when I was just about 16 years old, between my sophomore and junior years of high school, I grew up in a small town, and a barely large enough town of 6,000 or 7,000 people, barely large enough to have a radio station. But they employed high school students in part-time roles, doing basically semi-disc jockey stuff. It was really kind of semi-automated, so you didn't get to talk a lot. And employing us in the news crew to go out and cover stories. So when I was 16, I went to work for my hometown radio station, WJBD in Salem, Illinois. And I was very fortunate that they had faith in me to do it, and they started asking me to do all kinds of things. The experiences that I got in small town radio really helped me have a wide variety of skills that I never would have gotten if I'd grown up in Chicago or Detroit or someplace like that. You can't be on the real radio in 1979 in a major city. So being from a small town allowed me to do that. And it was either 1980 or 81, I was a senior, and I was asked to do a girls basketball game for Salem High School on the radio. And that was my first play-by-play job. I had never done anything except the pretend stuff that we all did when we were, 8 years old or whatever. And so that was my first experience. It went well enough that I got a chance to do more, and on we went from there.
It's so funny that you mentioned that because, I was, I think, 14, and I've told this story before, and started in my father's radio station, WFIS AM, that stood for Fountain Inn, Simpsonville, South Carolina, and did obituaries and the weather, and then ran a lot of games. And, I ran the Braves. We ran Clemson on the radio. We also ran South Carolina, even Furman University. So I would run the board, play the commercials, the local commercials. But, there's some of that, I think, just being there, absorbing it, and having to pay attention a little bit more than if you're just listening to a game. I mean, you had to wait for the cues. You kind of learn some of the tricks of the trade over time. You figure out, I see why Bob Fulton for South Carolina. This is the way he sets up commercials. You can just tell in the cadence of his voice or the words that he says. I know he's about to go to break or he's about to call for a station ID.
Station ID.
And you don't even think about it till, again, my first game on the air was, I guess, when I was a freshman in college, was a high school baseball game. And you suddenly find out, you remember some of those things that you did not know subconsciously you had taken in that suddenly find their way into the way you present a game. And, those were valuable times. Doing the obituary, doing the weather, sometimes getting to do a news update. That practice, again, not really calling games other than calling my own action in the backyard.
Right.
It's amazing how much of that you retain and you don't even know you did.
Exactly. No question about it. It's amazing that so many sportscasters come from small towns who had the ability to get on the air at a very young age, and I'm lucky that I was able to do that.
Let's talk a little bit about crazy stories. If you did girls basketball in the early 80s, and you've done, different levels of sporting events, sometimes the venue's not, they don't want you there. I've certainly ran into that over the years. They're like, what are you doing here? We don't have a place for you. We can put you up at the top. Crazy stories. Give me something wild that happened that, people probably in 2021 can't imagine happening now based on the way the media operates.
I'll give you a story that's, okay, I've got two of them. I'll start with the one. I was working after college. I started the sort of itinerant lifestyle of a young radio personality, and I had taken a job in Selma, Alabama. It was the fall of 1987, and it was playoff time in football, and the local schools had all been eliminated. So the radio station I was working for in Selma was looking around the area, around the region, for a place to do a playoff football game. And there were these two tiny little towns, and I cannot for the life of me remember the names of them, but neither of the towns had more than 200 people in them, and it was class, D level or whatever it was. They said, we're going to go do the football game there between these two small towns, even though our signal doesn't reach up there. So you get an idea. The reason they did, of course, because they could sell it. They could sell advertising on it. So me and another guy went up there to do the game. And, of course, just like you said, there was really no facilities for us. They didn't have a press box. They had a booth where the PA guy was and the guys that ran the scoreboard were. They told us that we could go up on top of it and do the broadcast from up there. This is going to get a little technical and old-fashioned radio, but the way we got the signal back to our radio station in Selma was we took a Marty broadcast unit. That's a little transmitter, and we sent our signal to the mayor's house. And at the mayor's house, we used alligator clips from the Marty receiver, which we also had to bring up there, and clipped it to the speaker. You unscrew the voice receptor of the speaker and clip alligator clips in there to get the audio into the phone and then called back to the radio station. Well, we couldn't hear back to the radio station for any of the, commercial cues or anything like that. In the midst of this game, which was a great game, the biggest thunderstorm in Alabama history rolled through, and we were on top of the booth. And we had to actually get down under the table that they had given us to be protected from the wind and the rain and the lightning, which was ferocious. The table eventually blew off from the wind out of there. And the scoreboard that they had old-fashioned metal sheets that they would hang the score on to the scoreboard with. It had an electronic clock, but just these metal sheets for the scores. It would have a 7 on it, or a 1 and a 4, whatever like that. Those things started flying off the scoreboard in the wind, and they were helicoptering around and could have easily cut somebody up ridiculously. Well, of course, we didn't know if we were on the air, and my broadcast partner, where there was very close lightning strike, uttered one of those words that you're not supposed to say on the radio, and we had no idea whether that we were on the air or not when that occurred. So we drove home after the game was over, and this guy was convinced that his radio career was over because he had used the S word. Turns out we had long since been off the air, and everything was fine. And eventually, about 2 hours later, we got the game back on, and as they resumed, and we finished it up from there. So yeah, that's one of those small town stories.
Yeah, when I first started doing high school football, I was out of college and I was calling the games. We were trying to be modern, and we just needed to find a way to have a sideline reporter who could hear us at all times. We didn't want to just go to him. A lot of people back in the late 80s and 90s, they would have a signal, a big card or a flag or something, and that would tell the sideline guy, start talking now. We wanted to have them just like they had on television. We wanted them part of the broadcast. Well, to get that type of equipment, you're talking thousands of dollars, which we did not have at the time. So our engineer actually came up with an idea, a baby monitor. And so we would actually get to the stadium, high school stadium, set up a baby monitor. He had put in a small amplifier to boost it a little bit because obviously in a packed stadium. But there were plenty of times where they're obviously in a neighborhood nearby, there had to be other moms and dads with baby monitors because we ran into interference, and sometimes it didn't work as well as it did. But that's what you tried to do. And I think your story speaks to, the work that broadcasters put in, whether they're calling, summer league baseball or whether they're calling a high school game. I mean, when that bug gets a hold of you and you want to do it and get the opportunity to do it, you give it everything you have. No matter where you're at, no matter what venue, no matter what team, most that I have come across over the years, they give it everything they have.
I'm so fortunate to be able to do what I do and have been able to do it for 22 years. I promise you there are thousands of guys out there. I see them on the internet. We're on Facebook groups together with different sportscasters and things like that. And every one of them that's toiling away in small high school football or high school soccer or whatever. I tip my hat to them. I was there. I get it. And someday one of you guys will have my job, and you'll love it. And you'll remember those times where you're doing the high school soccer game and the little football game or the 7-on-7 football game or whatever it is. And you'll remember that very fondly, because I promise you, I remember those old days the same way. It's the best stories are happening to you right now, guys.
Oh, we could absolutely sit here for the next hour and go back and forth, I imagine, between high school broadcasts, between even at Georgia Southern. We had challenges, and things sometimes weren't exactly the way we needed it to be when we arrived at a certain venue. The characters you run into, the stories are boundless, and truly, that's why I think broadcasters really should write books.
Absolutely.
But they got to be honest. I mean, they absolutely have to tell the truth. If they tell the truth, it will certainly be an entertaining read. Tom Hoefer joining us, the voice of the McNeese State Cowboys. Again, they will take on the Tigers at Tiger Stadium. A couple of more questions for you. Coming into this game after last week's loss to West Florida, your sense of what the mission for this team is, and number two, for you, I'm sure people ask you, are you going to change the way you do a game because it's at Tiger Stadium and you're going to be, 150 feet up in the air? And I mean, does it change what you do or how you prepare?
No, I guess a little bit in the sense that it's the unique circumstances of this game with Coach Orgeron and his son Cody as our quarterback. That's a little different, and so some of the questions at the press conferences are different, and the angles because of that are different. But beyond that, it's another game, and I will. It's easier for me to prepare because I don't have to study LSU nearly like I would have to study West Florida. Going into the West Florida game, I didn't know any of their players, and I had to learn quite a few people, their names and their numbers and their backgrounds. With LSU, I mean, we all follow LSU, even as McNeese Cowboy fans. We're very much aware of who the quarterback is and who the coaching staff is and their backgrounds. So there's less of just the basic stuff that you have to study and learn. So in that sense, I guess it's a little bit different. Knowing the everything we know about LSU makes it quite a bit easier just for figuring out who are the guys with the football and who is the quarterback and who's he throwing it to.
Last thing for you, Coach Wilson and the Cowboys. Obviously, we're recording this early in the week, but as you said, you cannot deny going back months now that this game has been scheduled. Certainly, it's on the top of mind of staff, players, obviously fans. What is their approach? What is their mission? If you may be so bold, what do you think their mission is going into this game? What do they want to accomplish?
Well, they definitely want to get better. I mean, there is no question that the Cowboys had certain aspects of the game, notably special teams. The kicking game in the West Florida game was not up to speed. So they want to get better. And also, they want to compete. McNeese has a very proud tradition of playing well in the games against these FBS opponents. We famously defeated South Florida in Raymond James Stadium by a very large margin back in, I think it was 2013. I think it was 50 something to 20. Just annihilated them in their home opener, and that was a wonderful experience. We were beating other FBS teams like ULL and Middle Tennessee, and almost upset Nebraska back in 2014. So we have that pride that we will compete well. Is the anticipation that we're going to win? No, of course not. That's not the anticipation. But it's really, really important to this team that's still a work in progress that they play well and contend and compete. And so those are the things that I know Coach Wilson and the Cowboys are really attempting to do. Got to start playing well, got to start accomplishing some things, got to start improving in certain areas.
Well, it's interesting, Tom. There's a lot of what you just said also being discussed right here at LSU as far as big picture and what this game in Week 2 means for Coach Ed Orgeron and the Tigers. Tom, it's been a pleasure. Look forward to seeing you on Saturday and welcome you to Tiger Stadium. It'll be the first chance for you and I to meet in person. But I appreciated talking with you today, and I certainly appreciate the work that you do for Calcasieu Parish as well as for the Cowboys. And keep doing a good job because I know it means a lot to a lot of people. So thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you on Saturday. Have a great call in the game.
Thanks, you too. I appreciate you having me on, and we'll sit down and tell the other 100 stories that we each have about our broadcasting careers when we get a chance. Thanks, Chris.
Sounds good. All right. Tom Hoefer, our guest, voice of the McNeese State Cowboys. They'll be rolling into town, take on your Tigers Saturday, coming up with a kickoff at 7 o'clock. Don't forget, we'll get things started again at 5 p.m. LSU game day from Tiger One Village, right across the street here. Hunt Palmer, Garrett Brumfield, Marlon Favorite will get the day started. And then Doug Morrow, Gordy Rush will join me at legendary Tiger Stadium. We'll have kickoff McNeese State LSU coming your way just after 7 o'clock. Thanks for stopping by this week. Thanks to Tom Hoefer for joining us, and we'll be back next week. This is Chris Blair, still Hearing Voices.
Voices is a production of LSUSP and Playfly Sports. Hit the subscribe button now and never miss a new episode. You can follow Chris at LSU Tigers Voice. The LSU Sports Radio Network, a division of LSUSP and Playfly Sports.